The boy sat frozen in the cold metal chair, his hands gripping the armrests as the buzzing clippers hovered near his head. Officer Daniels loomed over him, a smirk curling on his lips. "You think you can walk around looking like that?" The cop sneered. "Not in my town." Jamal, just 15, clenched his jaw. He had done nothing wrong, just walking home from basketball practice when the officer stopped him. Next thing he knew, he was dragged into the station, accused of looking suspicious. And now this. His heart pounded as chunks of his tight curls fell to the ground. The other officers chuckled from the corner. "Teaches him a lesson," one murmured. "Maybe next time, he'll show some respect." Jamal swallowed hard, biting back tears. He had been taught to stay calm, to never talk back. But humiliation burned deep, his reflection in the mirror barely recognizable. Then, boom, the door slammed open. Every head turned as a man in a crisp suit strode inside, his eyes blazing with fury. The air shifted. The chuckles stopped. Judge Carter, Jamal's father, and he had just witnessed everything. The room fell silent. Officer Daniels' smirk faded. The real reckoning was about to begin. Judge Carter's eyes scanned the room, taking in every detail. The scattered curls on the floor, the buzzing clippers still in the officer's hand, and most of all, the fear creeping onto Daniel's face. Jamal sat stiff in the chair, his fists clenched so tight his knuckles turned white. The silence stretched, thick with unspoken words. The other officers shifted uneasily. No one had expected anyone to walk in, least of all someone like Judge Carter, a man known for his no-nonsense approach to justice. Daniels cleared his throat, forcing an awkward chuckle. "Judge Carter," he started, voice suddenly tight. This isn't what it looks like." Carter's jaw tightened. "Oh." His voice was dangerously calm. He took a slow step forward, never breaking eye contact. "Because it looks like my son is being humiliated in a police station for no reason." Jumal's chest rose and fell quickly, but he stayed silent, watching his father with wide eyes. He had never seen him like this before. At home, his father was strict but fair, always pushing him to be his best. But now there was something else, a quiet rage simmering beneath the surface. Daniels glanced at the other officers, searching for backup, but no one spoke. No one moved. The power in the room had shifted. Judge Carter exhaled slowly. "I suggest you choose your next words very carefully." Daniels shifted uncomfortably, gripping the clippers in his hand like they could somehow defend him. "Judge Carter, your son was acting suspiciously," he said, forcing a confidence that wasn't there. "We had to make sure he wasn't involved in anything." Carter's expression didn't change. His gaze flicked to Jamal, his son's half-shaved head a painful sight. He turned back to the officer. "Suspicious?" His voice was steady, controlled. "Walking home from basketball practice is suspicious now." One of the other officers cleared his throat. He fit a description. Carter let out a slow breath, shaking his head. "A description?" He stepped closer, the air in the room tightening. "And that justified dragging a kid off the street, humiliating him like this." He looked around, daring someone to answer. No one did. Jamal swallowed hard, his heartbeat loud in his ears. His father wasn't yelling, wasn't throwing accusations. But somehow, this was worse. The weight of his presence, the way Daniels was visibly unraveling. Jamal had never seen an officer at a loss for words before. Daniels forced a smirk, trying to regain control. "Look, Judge, let's not blow this out of proportion. We were just trying to teach the kid some respect." Carter's jaw tightened. His hands curled into fists at his sides. Jamal saw it. The moment his father had heard enough. Judge Carter took a slow step forward, His sharp eyes locked onto Daniel's. The officer's smirk wavered, but he held his ground. Respect. Carter's voice was low, deliberate. You think this is how you teach respect? By forcing a child into a chair, shaving his head like he's some sort of criminal. Daniel's fingers twitched around the clippers. The weight of the room pressed in on him. Judge, I. Carter held up a hand, cutting him off. His movements were controlled, but his presence filled the room. Let me be very clear, he said, his voice like steel. You laid your hands on my son. You humiliated him. And you expect me to stand here and accept your excuses. Jumal's breathing was unsteady, his chest tight. He had never seen his father like this, so composed, yet so terrifying. Daniels, who moments ago had been grinning with authority, now looked unsure, his confidence cracking. One of the other officers cleared his throat, shifting nervously. Judge, maybe we should all just calm down. Carter turned his head slightly, fixing him with a look that made the man fall silent. Calm, his voice was quieter now, but somehow even more dangerous. Was my son calm when you dragged him in here? Was he calm when you put those clippers to his head? Daniel's face darkened. Look, he was out here dressed a certain way, looking like. Like what? Carter snapped, stepping forward so fast Daniels flinched. The tension cracked through the air like thunder. Go on. Say it. Daniels opened his mouth, but no words came out. Jumal's fingers dug into the chair's armrests. His father had him cornered, and everyone in that room knew it. The balance of power had completely shifted. And yet, the storm wasn't over. Not yet. The room was suffocatingly silent. Daniel's mouth opened, but nothing came out. His usual arrogance had crumbled under the weight of Judge Carter's stare. Jumal could feel the shift. His father wasn't just angry. He was waiting for Daniels to say the wrong thing. Then the phone on the desk rang, a sharp, jarring sound that made everyone jump. One of the officers hesitated before answering. Yes, sir, he said quickly, his face paling. He turned toward Daniels. It's the chief. He wants to talk to you. Daniels blinked, his bravado flickering for a moment before he snatched the phone. Yeah, his voice was tight, strained. He listened for a few seconds, his expression darkening. Chief, I. Another pause. His grip on the receiver tightened. No, sir, it's not like that. The room held its breath. Whatever was being said on the other end wasn't in Daniel's favor. His jaw tensed. Yes, sir, I understand. He lowered the phone, his knuckles white. Jomal glanced at his father, who didn't move, didn't even blink. He was waiting, unshaken. Daniels finally let out a slow breath, forcing a tight smile. Looks like there's been a misunderstanding, he muttered, though his voice lacked the confidence it once had. Carter tilted his head slightly. Is that so? Daniels hesitated, then squared his shoulders, trying to salvage control. We're going to let your son go, he said. No charges, no reports. He gestured vaguely toward the door. He's free to leave. Jumal exhaled, his muscles loosening slightly, but his father didn't move. He studied Daniels for a long moment before shaking his head. You still don't get it, he said quietly. Daniels frowned. What are you talking about? Judge Carter stepped closer, his voice calm but unyielding. You think this ends because you say he can walk out that door. He gestured to the clippers, to the curls on the floor. You think you can humiliate my son, violate his dignity, and just brush it away like nothing happened. The tension in the room sharpened again. Daniel's face twitched. The other officers exchanged wary glances, sensing the ground shifting beneath them. Then the second door to the station swung open. A uniformed officer stepped inside, holding a folder in his hands. He looked confused as he scanned the room before his eyes landed on Carter. "Sir, you need to see this." Carter took the folder, flipping it open. His eyes skimmed the pages. Then, for the first time that night, his expression changed. His jaw set, his fingers tightening around the paper. Jamal frowned. "Dad." Carter looked up slowly, his gaze cutting through the room like a blade. He turned the file toward Daniel's. "Would you care to explain this?" Daniel's face lost all color. He took an uneasy step back, his confidence evaporating completely. Something much bigger was happening here, and Jamal was starting to realize this wasn't just about him anymore. Daniel's eyes darted between Judge Carter and the folder, his breathing unsteady. I don't know what that is," he stammered, but his voice wavered. Carter held the file up, his fingers pressing into the pages. "Really? Because it's a record of complaints filed against you." He flipped through the papers, his voice cold. Excessive force. Unlawful detainment. Multiple cases dismissed due to lack of evidence. He glanced up, his expression unreadable. And yet, here we are. Jamal's stomach tightened. This wasn't just about him. This had happened before. Daniel's face twisted. "Those are lies," he snapped. "Made-up claims from people looking for a payout." Carter didn't flinch. "Then why is your chief on the phone right now?" He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Why is Internal Affairs looking into you as we speak?" Daniel's confidence shattered. His hand twitched at his side, but he had nothing left to say. The other officers took small steps away from him, their silence speaking volumes. Jamal swallowed hard, his heart racing. He had walked in here thinking this was about one bad cop, one awful moment, but it was so much bigger than that. Carter finally exhaled and placed the folder on the desk. "Jamal, get your things." Jamal stood slowly, his legs still shaky, but he did as he was told. As he brushed a hand over his unevenly shaved head, he felt the weight of everything that had happened, but also the power of what had just been exposed. Just as they turned to leave, a voice stopped them. "You think this is over?" Daniel's tone was lower now, edged with something almost desperate. "People like me don't go down that easy." Carter paused at the door, but didn't turn around. "That's where you're wrong," he said. "Because this time, people are watching." Jamal followed his father out, the station heavy with silence behind them. But as they stepped into the night, he knew this wasn't just the end of something. It was the beginning. The car ride home was quiet, the hum of the engine filling the space between them. Jamal stared out the window, watching the streetlights flare past. His head still felt light, strange without the full weight of his curls. But the real weight, the humiliation, the anger, the fear, was harder to shake. His father finally spoke, his voice calm but firm. "This isn't over, Jamal." Jamal turned to him. "What do you mean?" Carter's hands tightened on the wheel. "Daniels won't be able to walk away from this like he has before. The chief knows now. Internal Affairs is involved. People are watching." He glanced at his son. "And I'll make sure he answers for what he's done." Jamal nodded slowly, letting that sink in. His father had always taught him about justice, about right and wrong. But tonight, he had seen firsthand that justice wasn't always immediate. It had to be fought for. As they pulled into the driveway, Carter put the car in park and turned to him. "You stood strong tonight," he said. "I'm proud of you." Jamal felt a lump in his throat, but managed a small smile. Stepping out into the night, he took a deep breath. He had been humiliated, but he wasn't broken. And he knew now, his voice, his story mattered.